Hello and welcome to In Parliament. I'm Sharon Tong. History was made in Parliament today with the election of Singapore's first female speaker. Madam Halimah Yacob took the speaker's seat at the start of today's parliamentary sitting. She fills the position vacated by former Speaker Michael Palmer, who stepped down last December after admitting to an extramarital affair. Several members of the House paid tribute to Madam Halimah, recounting her rise through the Labour movement to becoming Minister of State for Social and Family Development. She stepped down from that position yesterday to take on her current role.
Madam Halimah deserves all the accolades you have heard or read about her. There can be no doubt in anyone's mind that she is here on her own merit and not because of her gender, race or connections. In my humble opinion, her election as Singapore's 9th Speaker of Parliament is nothing less than an inspired choice of the highest order. Not only does she have the personal qualities to discharge the duties of Speaker with competence and dignity, she embodies the courage and conviction of Singaporeans who rise above their circumstances.
The news comes with nothing more than accolades and unending praises, from acknowledging your credentials for the post, to breaking the glass ceiling for women in public office, to bringing yet another proud moment for the Malay Muslim community. You are indeed the epitome of the spirit of a true Singaporean, striving to do your best in whatever you do, never compromising on your core principles of honesty and integrity, and that regardless of background, with hard work and determination, one can succeed.
Madam Speaker, I did some arithmetic on your career. While you were part of the Prime Minister's cabinet for 19 months, you were a backbencher for 113 months, or 9.5 years. The arithmetic would suggest that a lot of goodwill from the backbenchers, these seats and their occupants, flow with you to your chair now. I hope and am also confident that this will lead to you, Madam Speaker, allowing fair, robust and effective debate between the front bench and the back bench, as you displayed so vividly as a backbencher.
We will now need to look forward and focus on important national issues before this House. Indeed, Parliament has its work cut out for its remaining session. Over the next few months, we will debate the population white paper, the budget and its estimates in the Committee of Supply. Singapore is at the cusp of transition as we face impending and difficult challenges, particularly from the effects of an aging population coupled with low fertility rates. With more elderly Singaporeans, we must step up our social services and healthcare.
Members of the House also commended Michael Palmer for his contributions as former Speaker. Several agreed that Mr. Palmer was an able Speaker who gave parliamentarians ample opportunities to air their views. He held the position from October 2011 to December last year.
When Michael Palmer was first elected as Speaker, those of us who are used to Speaker profiles who were far older did not know what to expect of young Mr. Palmer. He took over speakership at a time when a fair and steady hand was needed even more to manage the dynamics of a House with a mix of PAP MPs and a total of 6 elected opposition MPs, 3 NC MPs and 9 nominated MPs. As time would tell, Mr. Palmer quickly learned the ropes and took to his speaker duties well. I'm sure that many in the House would agree that Mr. Palmer has discharged his duties as Speaker of this House with professionalism, fairness and confidence.
In her new role as Speaker, Madam Halimah Yacob said she was aware of the huge demands and heavy responsibilities of her position. She said she was confident of support and cooperation from members of the House in carrying out her duty. Madam Halimah said parliamentarians owe a duty to Singaporeans to act in their best interest.
Honourable members may have different views, and I expect debate to be vigorous. I believe that rigorous examination of policies and laws will no doubt ensure greater clarity, contribute to stronger policy formulation, and better reflect the needs of our society. As the guardian of parliamentary privileges, I expect members to speak freely, but I also urge you to respect these privileges accorded to us as members of Parliament. We have a duty to ensure the decorum and uphold the dignity and honour of this House.
On to question time. Foreign Affairs Minister Hsien does not expect bilateral ties between Singapore and China to be affected by the illegal strike staged by Chinese SMRT drivers. More than 170 SMRT bus drivers took part in a strike over pay and living conditions in late November. 5 drivers were charged with instigating the strike and one of them was jailed. Mr. Shanmugam said the actions by these drivers are being dealt with in accordance to Singapore's laws.
Our laws apply equally to all Singaporeans and foreigners residing in Singapore. So we see this strictly as a matter of law enforcement and do not expect the incidents to affect relations between Singapore and China.
As for Singapore's relations with US and China, countries which have recently undergone leadership renewal, Mr. Shanmugam said Singapore's position on peace and prosperity in Southeast Asia has been to maintain stability through a strong US presence, free and open trade and creating an ASEAN architecture. He said this should continue and is in the best interest of both the US and China. And while the relative weight of China is growing, he does not think the US is on a permanent decline and that Singapore's position has consistently been to be good friends of both.
Can I ask the Minister if he's concerned that with the growing US-China competition in this region, that divisions within ASEAN may widen and call into question its aspirations for centrality in the region?
There would always be a temptation by one country or another to see if they can get closer to some ASEAN countries. Again, we must expect all major countries to act in their own interests. But we have made the point quite forcefully that a united ASEAN better serves the interests of the major powers. Because ASEAN, with 600 million people, and growth at about somewhere between 5% or so, and with a regional economy close to US $2 trillion, is poised for takeoff. If our ASEAN vision comes through and the connectivity comes through, we will have roads, railroads, better connections, and the economies will become intermeshed. As a result of which, it provides tremendous opportunities for the US, Japan, China. So a united, prosperous, successful ASEAN is in everyone's interest. A divided ASEAN is in no one's interest. And that's a message that Singapore continues to give.
The government has recently introduced measures to prevent the abuse of the Executive Condominium or EC housing scheme. National Development Minister Koh Boon Wan told Parliament it will continue to remain vigilant against any further abuse. The ministry recently introduced measures to correct abuses of the system by developers and some buyers. These measures include imposing a size cap of 160 square meters and requiring buyers of dual-key EC units to be from multi-generational families. Executive condominiums came under the spotlight recently after several penthouse units were sold for exorbitant sums, with one having been sold for $2.05 million.
Do the recent prices for ECs not suggest that those purchasing can afford to purchase private property? And if so, how can the government ensure that even with the new rules that ECs are only intended for those who are that the scheme is designed to benefit? And if it cannot ensure that, should it even continue with the EC scheme?
It's really a wonderful scheme. You know, it protects middle-income Singaporeans from competition and ensuring a very market-friendly way of allowing them to buy condominiums at very affordable prices. I mean, if I may give analogies like offering you a Lexus at Corolla price. But only Singaporeans have this privilege for doing so, and they know that in due course the price will go up to Lexus and above Lexus level. So I think it's a very good scheme.
Defence Minister Ng has outlined his ministry's compensation and welfare framework for servicemen of the Singapore Armed Forces who are injured on duty. Dr. Ng said the amount given is significantly higher than that disbursed under the Work Injury Compensation Act at the civil courts. He was responding to an MP's question on whether the Defence Ministry provides adequate compensation for the long-term medical expenses and related costs of living for servicemen who are critically injured while on duty. The issue issue gained public interest when Jason Chi lost his legs and left arm in a ship accident last month.
First, MINDEF will pay for all medical expenses for treatment of injured servicemen at government and restructured hospitals or clinics. This includes the cost of medical supplies, equipment, counseling and psychiatric care for as long as required by the servicemen. Second, injured servicemen will receive lump sum compensation based on the degree of permanent disability sustained. The amount is doubled for disabilities that result during military training or operations. Additional amounts are also provided to servicemen who have total permanent disability for their constant care. Third, the SAF will aim to redeploy disabled servicemen to vocations that fit their abilities. Fourthly, the SAF Benevolent Fund provides discretionary amounts in welfare support to our injured servicemen and their families. For example, a serviceman with total permanent disability will receive a one-off grant as well as a monthly allowance for at least 3 years.
Communications and Information Minister Yaacob Ibrahim said authorities were aware of the vulnerability of the software tool used by one of the government websites before it got hacked last month. He said the agencies using this software were told to check ahead of time, but there was a lapse in maintenance. Dr. Yacob said the agency responsible for maintenance has stepped up its maintenance regime to ensure that checking and auditing is done more timely. In early December, the People's Association's website and 16 related sites were hacked. Dr. Yacob said while a high-tech Brazil hack team has claimed responsibility for the attacks, police have yet to establish the actual identities of the perpetrators. He added that preliminary investigations have traced the hacking activities to internet protocol addresses overseas, and the police have requested assistance from their foreign counterparts. Dr. Yacob assured the House that there was no evidence of leakage of visitors' personal information and the websites were not used to carry out online transactions.
Given the prevalent use of SingPass for many of the government websites, how is the government going to ensure the security of such transactions for citizens?
To assure the member and the House that there is a system in place which monitors government website on a continuing basis, it is really to ensure that if there is a detection of an incident, we will move in very rapidly. Meanwhile, there are policies and guidelines in which we have encouraged all agencies dealing with highly sensitive data or websites which are very popular whereby information is being gathered to put in place those systems. To your question about SingPass, it has been working quite well, but we're not resting on our laurels. We will continue to monitor the situation, and thus far, the system is safe and secure.
On to the issue of education. The Education Ministry's move to stop naming top PSLE scorers is aimed at recognizing students for their holistic development and not just based on their academic performance. Education Minister Heng Kiat reiterated this in Parliament today. He said PSLE is the end of one stage of a child's journey and the beginning of another, and the government wants to help students develop that disposition to embark on what will be a long journey of education.
The decision to stop releasing the lists of top PSLE scorers is not to address stress per se or to move away from merit. It is to signal and align our practices with the emphasis on holistic development and all-round excellence.
Will the ministry stop publishing the range of aggregate scores that the secondary 1 cohort students obtain as they gain admission into each secondary school, as is currently available on the School Information Services website?
The entry scores provide some indication of the, provides a guide to parents in terms of the schools that they apply to. But as in all measures, we'll be looking at it together with other issues that are relevant to the posting of secondary school students.
What Singaporeans want is a just and fair society that balances economic growth with a good quality of life. Acting Minister for Culture, Community and Youth Lawrence Wong said this is what has surfaced so far from a series of national dialogues called Our Singapore Conversation. Replying to a question on what key values and principles should be maintained in Singapore, Mr. Wong said the Our Singapore Conversation has tried to engage Singaporeans about shared values, ideals and aspirations. He said based on the dialogues, Singaporeans continue to care deeply about their families. He added they also value graciousness, kindness and help for the less fortunate.
These values are not at odds with the drive for economic growth and progress. However, if we pursue growth without concern for social justice, social well-being and cohesion, we will ultimately undermine many of the values we hold dear. So as a society, we have to strike a balance between head and heart, between our material and intangible goals. My ministry will also do its part to help strengthen social and cultural capital in Singapore. We will work with Singaporeans to inspire the Singapore spirit, whether through the arts, heritage or sports, and nurture stronger communities.
And there must be a balance between retaining Singapore's professional footballers and giving them the opportunity to play for regional and international clubs. Mr. Lawrence Wong told the Singapore Sports Council it's currently working with the Football Association of Singapore to conduct a review of football development in Singapore in a bid to improve standards. MP for Jurong GRC Ang Wei Neng asked what was being done to retain good national footballers when they were sought after to play for regional clubs which offer more favourable terms.
The best way to retain our players is to make sure that they have good development and growth opportunities in Singapore, such as playing in the Lions Trough team in the Malaysian Super League or for various S-League teams. Notwithstanding this, we recognise that professional players do sometimes relish the exposure they can gain from an overseas stint. If they play better as a result, they can still contribute to the national team when they are called upon for international matches.
How could we also better engage the national players to promote the sports among the youth so that the youth can also aspire to be national players one day?
I actually have been engaging or talking to the FAS and encouraging them to get more of our national players to go out to schools, to speak to students, engage students, to conduct soccer clinics, so that we can indeed motivate and inspire more young students to take up soccer, to hold them up as role models so that more young students will be inspired by what our Lions are doing.
5 bills were debated and passed in Parliament. First, the Computer Misuse Act, which has been renamed the Computer Misuse and Cyber Security Act, will strengthen Singapore's critical information infrastructure or CII environment and enable the government to take more effective and timely measures against cyber threats. This includes preventing, detecting and countering attacks that could threaten national security and disrupt essential services. Critical information infrastructure refers to energy, water, finance and banking, government, healthcare and the emergency services sectors. The changes to the Act would allow the Home Affairs Minister to issue a certificate to a CII operator, for example, requiring the person or entity to provide technical information relating to the design, configuration, operation and security of computers, computer programs or computer services. Non-compliance to the certificate could result in a fine not exceeding $50,000, imprisonment of up to 10 years or both. Several MPs questioned the scope of the Act's powers, expressing concerns that it may be too broad. Some also asked about safeguards in place against the abuse of powers.
Would it not be possible to institute periodic reviews by a separate panel to ensure that such powers have been properly exercised and information gathered, properly used or archived, and the appropriate cases destroyed?
What threshold must be met, or what factors will play in the mind of the Ministry of Home Affairs before the power to issue directions is exercised?
Section 15A circumscribes the use of the powers to situations where there is a threat to the national security, essential services, defense, or foreign relations of Singapore. So the Minister is constrained by the language of Section 15A when acting. The discretion is not unfettered. The government will undertake periodic internal reviews on the actions taken so that the measures can be calibrated or recalibrated as needed in future. We don't intend to have an external review panel as suggested by Mr. Hari Kumar, given the sensitivity and nature of the content.
Next, the Payment Systems Oversight Amendment Bill gives the Monetary Authority of Singapore, or MAS, the ability to immediately exercise emergency powers over an operator or settlement institution of a designated payment system during an emergency. It will not have to wait for a default by the operator or settlement institution.
The amendments to this bill seek to enhance MAS's oversight over the designated payment systems and to align Singapore's payment regulations with leading international standards. These amendments will ultimately aid to improve the safety, efficiency, and the confidence of the public in Singapore's payment systems.
The remaining 3 bills passed include several changes to the Stamp Duties Act. Among them, the appeal deadline for stamp duty has been extended from 21 to 30 days to align with the deadlines for other tax types, such as the goods and services tax. Also, changes clarify that stamp duty is not chargeable on a conveyance on sale of any type of property other than immovable property, stocks and shares. In addition, the bill incorporates a tax change announced in Budget 2012. The Singapore Accountancy Commission Bill aims to establish the Singapore Accountancy Commission and a framework for the growth and development of the accountancy sector and its related fields. It will also provide for the registration of chartered accountants in Singapore. The setting up of the commission will put the accountancy profession on the same footing as the legal, medical, architectural and engineering professions, all of which are overseen by statutory bodies. Finally, amendments to the Economic Expansion Incentives Act brings about 2 key tax changes. One of them is the introduction of the Integrated Investment Allowance. This allows Singapore-based companies to claim an additional allowance on top of capital allowance for qualifying equipment that it leases to a wholly owned subsidiary outside Singapore. Trade and Industry Minister Lim Hng Kiang said this change helps Singapore's tax incentive scheme stay competitive. The amendment also extends the tax relief period of the Development and Expansion Incentive, or DEI, from 20 years to 40 years. The DEI was introduced to encourage companies which engage in high value-added activities to operate in Singapore. And several new bills were tabled in Parliament today. They are amendments to the Fire Safety Act and the Legal Aid and Advice Act. If the changes are passed for the Legal Aid and Advice Act, the coverage of legal aid for the needy could be expanded, allowing more Singaporeans to seek legal aid. On the Fire Safety Act, the proposed changes would allow the Singapore Civil Defence Force to order the owner of a premise to close the premises for up to 3 days if he fails to put in fire safety measures despite repeated warnings. In addition, the penalty for offences such as unauthorised fire safety works or non-compliance with demolition orders may be increased. And Parliament has been adjourned. Good night.